Hello there! My video about my The Clone Wars / Revenge of the Sith fan edit has gotten way more views than I expected, and along with it, many comments. In those comments, I've gotten a lot of questions, confusion, and criticism over my editing choices and scene placement. So instead of continuing to reply to each person and repeat myself over and over, I've decided to make this video to explain the reasoning behind each one of my edits and try to clear up some confusion. That probably looked kind of weird because I wasn't looking at the camera, I was reading from a script on my screen here. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then click the card that's on the screen here, and it'll take you to my previous video. You may not end up agreeing with my decisions after I explain them, and that's okay. I'm willing to bet that we also don't agree on our opinions about which of the Star Wars movies are good, and that's okay too. By the way, all of the edits in my fan edit are final. I'm not going back or changing anything or releasing any updated versions. I don't think it's perfect, but I'm happy enough with it to where I just want to move on to working on other things and let it be. Once again, to the regular viewers on my channel, I will get back to releasing my normal content shortly. In fact, I'm working on editing the next video right now. It's an in-depth review of something sort of similar to my Infamous review that I've split into 3 parts because it's long. Here's a sneak peek. And ooh. I just put that on the wrong way. Okay, that's all you get. Sorry for the messy intro to this video, but one more thing that I wanted to mention is please be patient if you're waiting to get a link to see the fan edit. Both Twitter and Reddit have systems that block me from sending a certain amount of the same message, you know, over a certain period of time because it thinks I'm sending spam to people. So yeah, be patient. I've been getting a lot of messages. I'm not used to a video like blowing up and getting this many views. It's all new to me, so yeah, thank you. Alright, this is probably going to be a long video, so let's get going. I'm going to go through my fan edit and talk about all of the edits and my reasoning behind why I placed scenes in certain places or why I used a certain transition and things like that. Okay, so something that I want to say is that the goal of this edit was to combine the Clone Wars finale and Revenge of the Sith with the intent of preserving the styles of both in order to provide a complete chronological ending to the show that can be viewed as if it were a real movie. This is why I didn't include the 2D Clone Wars or Fallen Order or whatever else that might have taken place during the same time period. The edit has to make sense to the viewer and be well paced to keep them engaged in the story throughout the 4-hour-long runtime. It does not have to follow the canonical order of events as long as the order shown in the movie is believable to the viewer. This is because I'm trying to make a movie, not a documentation of the events. Okay, so the first thing that I have is just simply a copyright / anti-piracy disclaimer. Pretty obvious why I have that in there. Next, I have the opening logos. I added the Disney Plus logo during the 20th Century Fox fanfare. And then I actually have the Lucasfilm logo twice, which is kind of clunky and weird, but the reason for it is so that I can fit in Obi-Wan's dialogue, and it was nice to have the Lucasfilm logo that's used in Revenge of the Sith, and the one that's used in the Clone Wars, which is the classic Lucasfilm logo. So, like I was saying, I've added in some dialogue from Luke and Obi-Wan that is from A New Hope to the pre-crawl little opening part of the movie here. And in the background, Ahsoka's theme is playing. It's the same musical piece that plays in the first episode of the Clone Wars finale at the very start. So this is one of my most controversial edits. Pretty much any edit where I changed something from, you know, like the main saga Star Wars film format has been the most controversial of my edits. So let me try to explain why I did these. So having the Obi-Wan dialogue is not necessary at all. I honestly just did it because I liked it. I like hearing Luke mention the Clone Wars to Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan talk about that was before the Dark Times and before the Empire. I really like the tone that sets for this movie. I think Star Wars should be watched with the original trilogy first. So with that in mind, I think it's sort of cool to hear that right before the crawl, and hearing that while you read a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, and then hearing the bam of the crawl. I think it's really cool. Sends chills down my spine. Is it necessary? No, but I liked it, and I thought it added something to the edit for me, so that's why it's in there. Okay, so moving on to the actual crawl. Now, I have actually noticed since releasing this, there is a small error in the crawl, which is the first part of it moves up like really slowly, and it's kind of weird, but oh well. Anyway, so the text of the crawl itself is actually just a transcription of the opening announcement for the Clone Wars episode.
Outer Rim under siege. Separatist forces have launched a major offensive, led by the evil droid General Grievous,
which replaces the original crawl from Revenge of the Sith, simply because when this movie starts, the Chancellor has not been kidnapped by Grievous yet. So the crawl needs to set up the new opening scene of the movie, not the old one. Something that not everyone liked was I have the Clone Wars opening announcement montage playing in the background of the crawl. There's a few different reasons why I did that. The first reason, and the reason why I had the idea to do it in the first place, is because usually at the end of the crawl, it will transition into the first scene by tilting down from outer space, but there's no way that I can do that with the footage that I have from the Clone Wars and how that scene starts. So I came up with this as a way to transition a little more smoothly, and also it means that I can keep that Clone Wars footage in it and sort of mix the two styles that they have, which, like I said earlier, is part of the goal of this edit. So it will deviate from the main saga film format once in a while in a few places where it does, and for most of the times that it does, the reason is so that I can mix the style of the Clone Wars finale with Revenge of the Sith's style. Plus, I think it looks kind of cool to have the crawl going over something other than space for a change. A lot of other people might not think that's cool. That's fine. Okay, so next we have the Battle of Urbana, and we also have Anakin and Obi-Wan meeting up with Ahsoka and Bo-Katan again. It's pretty obvious why this scene is, or these scenes are placed where they are. It's just because they take place before any of the scenes of Revenge of the Sith, so they have to be here. Okay, and here we have another change to the main saga film format. I have included these part titles. There's 4, well, actually 5 of them, as we'll see. And they are the episode titles from the Clone Wars. Now, quite a few people, once again, did not like this change that I made. Maybe it's something about how the font looks, or it being over footage from, either the movie or the show. Maybe that looks weird. And I can see that, but I can explain why I did it. So first off, I'm using the same font that is used at the start of those Clone Wars episodes, and same color of the font too. Once again, this was a part of mixing the two styles and the two viewing experiences, because when you watch those Clone Wars episodes, seeing these part titles is a part of seeing those episodes. That's how they were meant to be presented by the creators of the show. So I wanted to keep those in this. And I also think it fits with this movie being an extended edition, and being much longer than the normal Star Wars movie, to sort of like break it up into these 4 kind of 5 chapters. So it's something that I liked. Obviously, I liked it if I put it in here. I understand why not all of you liked that edit, and that's cool, but like I said before, I'm not changing anything. Okay, so now to talk about this specific part title and how it fits with the movie. So part 1 is Old Friends Not Forgotten. Obviously, that has to do with Anakin meeting up with Ahsoka again, and Rex and the clones meeting up with her again too. But it also applies to the first part of the movie that we're going to see of Revenge of the Sith, because Anakin is meeting up with Palpatine and Padme, both of which he hasn't seen in a while, like a few months or something. So Old Friends Not Forgotten fits with that as well. Part 1 is largely about introducing Anakin's attachments to Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, Palpatine, and most importantly, Padme, because, you know, that's what's going to lead him to the dark side. Okay, so the first transition between the two different mediums is after Ahsoka says goodbye to Anakin, we wipe over to the Battle of Coruscant. And I think it works really well to hear Ahsoka tell Anakin good luck, and then cut to what she's wishing him luck on. Also, the Siege of Mandalore and the Battle of Coruscant take place relatively at the same time. We can assume a similar musical cue plays in both of them. Which might indicate that those happen at exactly the same time. Although I think it's more symbolic of when things are and not meant to be like an exact science. Not meant to be totally literally. Because later during the Darth Maul and Ahsoka fight, there's like Palpatine's scream when he twists with his lightsaber. And those two scenes do not overlap, so I think it's just a little homage there. Okay, so one of the things that I noticed you guys didn't fully understand is the timeline of when things are happening and like on what day they're happening on and like how many days are covered throughout this movie. So I will be keeping track of whenever it is a new day. So starting with the Battle of Coruscant, we're gonna say this is the start of day 1. So originally I intercut the Battle of Coruscant and the Siege of Mandalore, which is something that I saw in the comments. People were wondering why I didn't do that and thinking that I should. So I think that doing this works really well for those scenes, but it doesn't work well when you put the whole movie into perspective. And the reason for that is because the pacing doesn't work when you quickly cut between two perspectives for like an hour and a half. And then for the next like half hour or so, it only shows one perspective. I tried it, it felt really jarring. But anyways, here are the original edits I made that did not make it into the final version.
R2, go back. I need you to stay with the ship.
Yeah, take this and wait for orders.
Beat you.
Some things never change.
I was hoping for Kenobi. Why are you here?
Sith Lords are our speciality.
Your swords, please. We don't want to make a mess of things in front of the Chancellor.
Is behind the times.
It's her. Come on, we'll trace the signal.
You won't get away this time, Dooku.
I was certain that Kenobi would have come himself. The moment may be upon us.
I shouldn't.
Do it.
Why you? No. Darth Sidious.
We've lost them.
You did well, Anakin.
So I had to sacrifice an exciting opening sequence for the purpose of having better pacing throughout the movie. Keep in mind that oftentimes in Star Wars movies, there's not much cutting back and forth between different things going on towards the start of the movie, but there oftentimes is during the ending of the movie. So I looked at this as the pacing should get more exciting as the movie goes on. And it sort of has a climax with Order 66, just in terms of how quickly we're cutting back and forth. But yeah, I settled for a slow buildup of intensity because I thought it was better than just having something really exciting and then being left with just Anakin and Obi-Wan on Coruscant for a long time and not knowing what's happening to Ahsoka, which felt weird when previously you always knew what was happening to her while you knew what was happening to Anakin and Obi-Wan. So in my final version, we have a large chunk of the Clone Wars first, then we have a large chunk of Revenge of the Sith, then another one of the Clone Wars, then one from Revenge of the Sith again, and then at that point it starts cutting back and forth a little more frequently. But yeah, that's just how I had to balance that. Okay, so the whole Battle of Coruscant plays out. Anakin meets back up with Padme, and then we transition to the Siege of Mandalore. Now, I actually have some good reasoning for putting the Siege of Mandalore after the Battle of Coruscant. And that is that I think Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Ahsoka, when they met up, I think they were closer to Coruscant than they were to Mandalore. And the reason for that is Obi-Wan says they can get to Coruscant within the hour, which is basically an argument that he's making for why they should go to Coruscant instead of Mandalore, meaning that it would take longer to get to Mandalore. Yeah, so we have a sort of large chunk of the Clone Wars here, like I said, and the next edit is editing 2 Clone Wars scenes together, actually, because the first episode ends and the second episode starts like in the middle of the same scene when Maul has cornered Ahsoka in the sewers. And I don't know if anyone noticed this, but I actually removed a few shots that are in those episodes simply to have a quicker transition that doesn't break immersion as much. Those shots that I cut out, they don't tell the viewer anything necessary that we wouldn't have gotten from the other shots that were already there, so I cut them out for that reason. Okay, so Ahsoka and Rex lose Maul, and then we cut to Grievous arriving on Utapau and speaking to Darth Sidious. So chronologically, Ahsoka's events thus far have to end here because in the next scene she's talking to Obi-Wan, and that's after Obi-Wan has been sent to Utapau by the Jedi Council. And in terms of pacing this movie, I think it works really well that part 1 is mostly lighthearted action, fun adventure things going on. And then at the end of part 1, we get Maul telling Ahsoka that Darth Sidious is going to take over the galaxy. That's the first time we've heard the name Sidious in this movie. And obviously, people know Sidious is Palpatine, but Palpatine hasn't shown himself as Sidious at this point in the movie, so I think it works for Maul to mention Sidious and set a bit of an ominous tone, and then in the next scene is the first scene where we actually see Palpatine as Darth Sidious talking to Grievous and telling him that the war is going to be over soon, which confirms what Maul was saying. I think that scene transition and placement works really well. Also, John Williams' fantastic score for Revenge of the Sith helped with that transition a lot. Kevin Kiner also has a fantastic transition for the Clone Wars, or score, I mean, and all of that music helped with my transitions and making them feel smoother. So big shout out to them. Oh, also something that I wanted to mention is I use a lot of wipe transitions, and that's simply because in Star Wars movies, wipes are constantly used whenever you transition to a new scene that takes place in a different location, usually. So, you will notice that once I'm cutting back and forth from scenes where we obviously know where that scene is and it's not too much of a big movement from where the previous scene took place, then I won't use a wipe. I'll just do a normal cut because it doesn't feel natural to me to use wipes for every single transition. That would just be too much. Okay, so now we have a part title for part 2, The Phantom Apprentice. This is actually placed a little bit after where you would see it in the Clone Wars because, like I said, those 2 episodes are split up in the middle of the Darth Maul scene. I really like the placement of this part title because it's right after Palpatine mentions a new apprentice that he will soon have, and it's right before a scene with Anakin because, you know, after all, Anakin is the Phantom Apprentice. So part 2 focuses a lot on Anakin's temptation towards the dark side, both with Revenge of the Sith during this part and with the Clone Wars because Maul mentions to Ahsoka that this is happening. Okay, so we got a big chunk of Revenge of the Sith focusing on Anakin's relationship with Palpatine and the Jedi Council. And we move on to day 2 in the timeline, which starts with Anakin talking to Yoda in the morning, and it ends with the opera scene at night where Palpatine tells him the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise. Ironic. Okay, and then day 3 starts, which has Yoda's battle on Kashyyyk beginning, while he meets with the Jedi Council and they decide to send Obi-Wan to hunt down Grievous. So the next transition is from the Battle of Kashyyyk starting to Obi-Wan contacting Ahsoka on Mandalore. Now, the way that I see it, this scene pretty much has to take place here if it's going to make sense, because it's after Obi-Wan is ordered to go to Utapau, but it's before he actually leaves Coruscant to go there. And Obi-Wan's dialogue in that scene says, "I am being sent to hunt down Grievous." So to me, that sounds like he hasn't gone to Utapau yet. Now, some people have mentioned that Obi-Wan's hood is up, like it is when he arrives on Utapau, which might indicate that he is already there in this scene. But I think it makes sense that he would have his hood up because he's meeting with Ahsoka in secret. She's no longer a part of the Jedi Order and he's telling her confidential information, so I think he's still in the Jedi Temple on Coruscant during this scene. So whether or not this scene takes place before Obi-Wan leaves Coruscant or after, we're not really sure, but for the sake of getting these Clone Wars scenes going in my edit, I decided that it was while he was on Coruscant. That way, we don't have to sit through a larger chunk of Revenge of the Sith before we get back to the Clone Wars. So, at the end of the scene, Ahsoka says, "Tell Anakin," which is a little bit confusing about what she wants Obi-Wan to tell Anakin. I think she just means to tell Anakin why she can't contact him because there's been an attack on Mandalore that she has to go investigate. And I didn't cut to the scene of Obi-Wan saying goodbye to Anakin after this because it would just seem weird that Obi-Wan doesn't mention Ahsoka to Anakin. Obviously that can't happen because it's Revenge of the Sith, which was made before Ahsoka was invented as a character. But that would stick out as being awkward to someone who was like a first-time viewer, which is why I had that scene placed a little bit later. Also, I think it helps the Ahsoka scenes flow better when she talks about the attack that just happened and then goes to investigate it right after. Okay, so the next transition is Maul interrogating Jesse, and then it cuts to Obi-Wan saying goodbye to Anakin. It is slightly weird to me still that Obi-Wan doesn't mention Ahsoka to Anakin in the scene. Like, I know it's not possible for that to happen because of when these things were made, but that is a little bit odd in my fan edit. And honestly, it's a little bit odd that Anakin and Obi-Wan never mentioned the Siege of Mandalore to the Jedi Council to try to get Ahsoka some more help in some way. It makes them kind of seem like assholes for doing that, but whatever, we'll just have to let that be. Okay, so the next transition is Obi-Wan leaving Coruscant to Prime Minister Almec's cell. And I don't know if anybody noticed this, but there's actually a glitch in the wipe here where it doesn't look perfect. And I don't know why that happened. It seems to be a glitch in Adobe Premiere. For some reason, the wipes do that sometimes. And I could not fix it, so I just left it because I didn't think it was too bad or noticeable. So something that I like here is Prime Minister Almec mentions that Anakin is who Maul had a vision of. And then in the next scene after Almec is killed and Saxon escapes, we see Anakin. I like doing that, like a character is mentioned in one scene and then the next scene has that character. Also, for the scene transition that goes from Bo looking out to where Saxon is going over to Anakin's like nightmare and then Anakin, I used a very quick fade to sort of blend it into Anakin's dream sequence and how that was edited. Okay, so after this Anakin and Padme scene, we go back to Mandalore, and we have all of the Battle of Mandalore things right here. And the reason for having this larger chunk of Clone Wars here is because I had tried to have Obi-Wan fighting Grievous like at the same time that Ahsoka fights Maul, but it just didn't feel like it matched up or worked with the council meeting scene, which has both the Clone Wars and Revenge of the Sith in it, and also it sort of just messed up both of the scenes trying to intercut them. Alright, so we get like Ahsoka versus Maul. Maul tells Ahsoka that Anakin is being led to the dark side. Maul gets captured, and then we get the Part 3 title, which is Shattered. Obviously, I put it right over the shattered glass because I thought that fit really well. I liked it. Also, it does sort of represent a turning point in the story, where Part 3 is going to focus on the dramatic change in Anakin and the ruling power of the galaxy. Him and Ahsoka and Obi-Wan and the clones and Padme and the Jedi and the Republic and the entire galaxy are going to be shattered in this next part. So, I mean, that's kind of obvious. Okay, so from there, when Ahsoka is looking at the shattered glass, we transition to Obi-Wan arriving on Utapau, and we are now to day 4. Then we have Obi-Wan sending his fighter back to Cody, and then transitioning to daytime on Mandalore. And then in this scene, Rex tells Ahsoka that Anakin is at a meeting that they're going to go to, which is the Jedi Council meeting that we see later. Some people thought this scene was put in too early, but I do have reasons for putting it where it is. And there's kind of multiple reasons for that. First off, even though the sun has risen on Mandalore, I didn't want to be too much time before we cut back to Mandalore, since the same transport is flying with Maul in it from like the top of the city down to the bottom of the city. Honestly, the timeline doesn't really make sense there, how that took them until after the sun has risen just to get down to where Bo is. But I didn't want there to be too much of a time difference there because that would seem weird. Also, once we see Obi-Wan sort of rent his animal to ride on, all the way through the end of that scene where it goes to the Jedi Council meeting, only about 5 minutes of real time have passed. And in the comments, some people said they didn't think it would take Ahsoka 5 minutes to get to the meeting. But I think it makes sense that the place that they went to the meeting, that building might not have been right next to them. They might have had to get on a transport to fly over there. That could have taken 5 minutes. Sure, I'm just guessing about things here. And maybe you guys are right that the scene would be better placed just one scene ahead. But that council meeting definitely could have gone on for longer than 5 minutes. So I think it's believable. I don't think it's too weird. When I watched the movie all the way through on my own, I thought it worked. But I understand why not everyone liked that scene placement. Also, I like transitioning to the council meeting from Cody finding Obi-Wan's lightsaber, because at the very start of the meeting scene, Cody is telling the council that Obi-Wan has engaged Grievous. So once again, that's something where I like seeing from one scene to the next, there's like some sort of a story thread that's connecting the two. And in this case, it's Commander Cody and the fact that Obi-Wan and the 212th have engaged Grievous. Okay, so now we have the council meeting scene, which is in both the Clone Wars and Revenge of the Sith. So after Mace Windu tells Anakin to leave to tell the Chancellor about Grievous, we have a shot from the Clone Wars of Ahsoka and Rex walking up to the building where they're gonna be in the meeting. And the reason that I have this shot is because I think it helps the viewer understand what's going on a little better, to see Ahsoka and Rex walking up to this place. Is it totally necessary? No, but I think it helps a little bit. Anyways, we see the meeting from the perspective of Mandalore. We see the holograms, and then in the middle of the meeting, it cuts back to Coruscant. And once again, that was just to help the viewer understand what's going on, to help them understand the fact that, yes, this is the same meeting, because it could be harder to understand since one is animated and one is live action. Also, when you have a hologram meeting, I think it's cool to show different perspectives of these people in the meeting from where they're sending a hologram from. Yeah, then at the end, it cuts back for Yoda's last line so that we can get the meeting scene from the Clone Wars. And something that I really like with mixing all these scenes together, and this isn't really my doing, it's mostly Dave Filoni's doing. All of the Clone Wars scenes really add to Revenge of the Sith. They deepen the story of what's going on, and the tone ends up being like a lot more sad and tragic. And in the same way, Revenge of the Sith helps the Clone Wars scenes be better simply because, you know, you have more context with what is going on with Anakin and Obi-Wan and with the rest of the galaxy, while Ahsoka is dealing with Maul telling her that Anakin is going to turn to the dark side, and Order 66 and all that. But yeah, one of the best things that the Clone Wars has done is it has added a lot of depth to the prequel era, where previously I didn't feel like there was very much. And I think it has taken Revenge of the Sith from being a not very good movie to being a decently good, acceptable movie. That's how I view it. I know probably a lot of you guys really like Revenge of the Sith. I actually like it quite a bit after the Clone Wars and all things considered, but before I watched the Clone Wars, being totally honest here, I didn't really like the movie, and I still don't think it's flawless. It has issues, but anyways, I'll save that for another video some other time. Okay, so Rex tells Ahsoka that she didn't mention what Maul said about Anakin to the Council, and she says that she didn't, which is a good transition point over to what Anakin's doing, because Ahsoka just mentioned him. Once again, that demonstrates how I like to cut with mentioning a character, then cutting to a scene with that character. Okay, then we have the scene of Obi-Wan killing Grievous, and from there, we transition to Ahsoka and Rex leaving Mandalore to transport Maul to Coruscant. And I like how in the council meeting, Ahsoka mentioned that if Obi-Wan is able to kill Grievous, then the war will be over soon. And I like the sort of irony that she doesn't know that that has just happened and that the war is now over. And that she doesn't know that since the war is now over, Order 66 is about to happen pretty soon. Also, something that I did just notice that confirms something that I said earlier is you can see here that the communications room on Mandalore where Ahsoka went to the council meeting, it is on the docks of Sundari City, meaning it could have taken Ahsoka and Rex about 5 minutes to get from the middle of Sundari to the docks to actually join the meeting. During these scenes of the Clone Wars, we have a really cool ambient electronic score, which reminds me a lot of Blade Runner, and that was really fun to blend into the Revenge of the Sith scenes, because the Clone Wars scenes feel a lot more ominous, so there also ends up being an irony as to what the characters in Revenge of the Sith don't realize is about to happen, because Ahsoka never told them what Maul said. Okay, so Maul is taken aboard this Republic attack cruiser, aka a Venator-class Star Destroyer. There's like too many damn names for that type of ship. And then we transition to the Jedi Temple hangar where Anakin tells Mace Windu that Palpatine is a Sith. And there's another reason why I chose to have the scene of Ahsoka leaving Mandalore in between the scene of Obi-Wan killing Grievous and Anakin telling Mace that Palpatine is a Sith. And the reason for that is the Anakin and Mace scene starts off with Mace saying that they just got word that Grievous has been destroyed. And although I said I like when they cut from something happening to the characters like reacting to that or something linked to it in the next scene, that to me, for the purposes of the pacing of this movie, feels like it's really quick that Mace Windu gets the information that Grievous has been destroyed. So that's part of why I added that scene in the middle, to sort of stretch that pacing out and make it feel more believable within the context of this longer movie. Okay, and now we get to what is perhaps my favorite scene placement and edit. And I will tell you why it's my favorite, but it's also something that I did on accident. So I'm not gonna take credit for this. I'm not this much of a genius. I did it on accident and noticed how cool it was later. So Mace Windu tells Anakin to wait in the council chambers while he and the other Jedi go to arrest Palpatine, and he tells Anakin not to interfere. Right after that, we get a scene of Maul being placed in a prison cell, and then it cuts back to Anakin waiting in the council chambers. So why I love this so much is Maul being placed in his cell basically gets turned into symbolism of Anakin feeling like he is being put in a cell by not being allowed to go with Mace Windu. And I think that weird sort of parallel really helps you sympathize with Anakin during this moment and sort of understand what he feels in a way that's not very direct, and you might not even notice it, but your brain did, if I am to quote Mr. Plinkett. If anyone has seen the Plinkett reviews of the prequels, I highly recommend them. Anyways, that's why I love that scene. I did that on accident. I didn't plan to create that symbolism, but I noticed it when I watched it later, and I'm like, wow, that's awesome. Also, the ambient Clone Wars music blends very well with the ambient music that plays while Anakin is waiting in the council chambers and Padme is in her apartment looking out across the city towards him. Okay, so the next time that we cut back to the Clone Wars is during the Mace Windu versus Palpatine fight. We cut to Ahsoka and Rex on the bridge of the attack cruiser as they jump into hyperspace. So the reason why I didn't have this scene earlier is I don't want to ruin the transition of Anakin waiting in the temple to him choosing to get into his speeder to leave and go interfere, because I think that's a very important edit in the movie that shows his choice. And lots of people have said that the scene with Ahsoka and Rex on the bridge should take place after the Mace versus Palpatine fight. Now, canonically, that might make sense because at the end of that scene, Rex gets new orders, or he's called off to get a new briefing, which ends up being Order 66. But the way that I looked at this is that he gets called off to a briefing that isn't necessarily Order 66, but while he is there, Order 66 is given to him. And the main reason why I wanted to add the scene of Ahsoka talking to Rex during the Mace Windu fight is because of how Ahsoka's dialogue has to do with the actions of Mace Windu. She's saying that the Jedi are meant to be peacekeepers, not soldiers, which is something that Mace Windu had previously stated long before the war ever started. But now we see Mace acting as a warrior, as someone who's going to arrest Palpatine or even kill him, not even give him a trial. Mace is a Jedi who is not following the Jedi way, and both this and Ahsoka's dialogue, when you pair them together, I think it really goes to show how the Jedi have lost their way, and that's one of the main reasons why the people of the galaxy are able to turn on them so easily, and how Palpatine is able to get power over them is because he was able to get the Jedi to go against their own beliefs. Alright, so after Palpatine says, "We shall have peace," it cuts to Maul and Ahsoka having the vision where they sense Anakin turning to the dark side and they hear the voices from the previous scene. So I originally did try to intertwine Ahsoka sensing these things as they happen, but it ended up looking really messy and it honestly ruined both of the scenes, so I settled for just putting the scene of her sensing that happening after it happens. And if you want a logical explanation for it, I don't know if there is one, but maybe you could say that things don't travel instantly through the Force? I don't know. Or maybe it's because Ahsoka's in hyperspace? I don't know. One of my favorite transitions is when Ahsoka says Anakin, and then we cut to Anakin marching on the temple with that menacing marching theme playing, and yeah, I think that worked really well. Okay, so Order 66 happens, and since the movie has this montage of all these different Jedi being killed on different planets, I thought that to seamlessly add the Ahsoka Order 66 scene into the movie, it has to be a part of that montage. So I've added it in after the speeder bike Jedi gets killed. Sorry, I don't know that Jedi's name. Wait, is it Stas Ali or something? I don't know, but she's not a Jedi who's in the Clone Wars, so I don't know her very well. Anyways, I have added a shot of the attack cruiser going through hyperspace because it seemed weird to just cut to the next shot, which is of Rex's eyes. It's a very close-up shot, since in this montage there's always an establishing shot of some sort showing where we are now. So I actually just pulled that from the next Clone Wars episode, put it in here. I also pulled an attack cruiser engine sound effect from Old Friends Not Forgotten and put that in here so that it wasn't just the music. And this is one of the biggest changes because I added music from Revenge of the Sith into a scene from the Clone Wars. Luckily that worked because this Clone Wars scene doesn't have any music in it, so I didn't have to edit out any music, which would have been very painful. And the reason the music is there is so that this fits into that montage. Now, I actually really like how quiet the scene is in the show because it adds a lot of tension to what's happening, because like you as a viewer, you know what's going to happen, and Rex, he doesn't want to do it. He knows what's going to happen too because of what he heard from Fives. So hopefully no one sees this as me ruining the scene, simply changing it, because like I said, I think if it's going to fit seamlessly into Revenge of the Sith, it has to be a part of that montage, and a big part of that montage is the music in it. So as soon as Rex points his pistols at Ahsoka and yells at her to stay back, I cut away from that, which some people didn't like, simply because that's one of the most emotional scenes in the whole show, if not the most. And personally, I think that's probably the best scene in the entire show. Either that or when Ahsoka leaves the Jedi Order. But anyways, the reason why I did it is I think it's quite dramatic to leave you on a little bit of a cliffhanger on not knowing what Rex does after he points his guns at her. And also because once Rex shoots at Ahsoka, the Clone Wars scene does have music, and it has different music, so I needed to smoothly transition into that music because I wasn't going to go through the trouble of editing it out. Plus, I like the music in that scene, so I didn't want to edit it out. Now, something that I don't think anybody noticed is I actually removed a few seconds of Revenge of the Sith here. There's some shots of the Battle of Kashyyyk during the Order 66 montage of just like clones and Wookiees fighting droids. Personally, I felt like those shots were totally pointless and not needed. So by taking them out, it gave me more of the music that I could use in that Clone Wars scene. So that's why those few shots are not in there, but let's be honest, I don't think anyone's gonna miss them. Also, I think it's an interesting scene placement to see the Yoda Order 66 scene here, because Yoda is the first Jedi who we see survive the attack of the clones. So leading up to the Ahsoka scene, if you're watching this as a first-time viewer, you very well may be led to believe that Ahsoka is about to die, because you're seeing all these other Jedi die when Order 66 happens. And then you cut away from Ahsoka and it leaves you on this cliffhanger of not knowing what's happening to her, and then you see that Yoda survives. So I feel like in a way that sort of as a viewer gives you a little more hope for Ahsoka, knowing that another Jedi did survive it. Well, I guess Obi-Wan already did, but that's just because the clones missed. But it also creates tension because Yoda brutally murdered his clones, so you think that if Ahsoka is going to survive, she's going to have to do the same to hers. And we don't want that to happen, because Rex is a beloved character, and so is Jesse. Anyways, this way we have a smoother transition between the two musical pieces. And I let the Order 66 montage music sort of slowly fade out while Rex tells Ahsoka to find Fives, which he kind of whispers under his breath, so it's good that there's not loud music over that. Okay, so we see that Ahsoka has survived by cutting a hole in the ceiling, and then we transition to the massacre on the Jedi Temple. I used a little bit of that Order 66 montage music to make that transition a bit smoother, and I wanted all of those Jedi Temple scenes to be together there without cutting back to Clone Wars during them. So once Bail Organa leaves the temple, then we cut back to Clone Wars, and Rex gives us a little bit more context for what Order 66 is. He says it's the order to kill the Jedi and any clones who don't follow the order. And here there is a edit within the Clone Wars that I really, really love and I didn't want to mess up, which is it cuts from the front of Rex's helmet to the front of Maul's case that he's in, which has a Mandalorian helmet on the front of it. And obviously clone helmets and Mandalorian helmets have a similar viewport on them. And the connection that is being indicated with this cut is that the clones are now hunting down the Jedi, similar to the ancient Mandalorian warriors who did the same. So I really like that. I didn't do that. That's just the Clone Wars. All right, so Ahsoka frees Maul to create a distraction, and then we cut to Obi-Wan swimming up from the water and surviving on Utapau, and we also see Yoda surviving after that. And I really like how the wipe I did here moves with Ahsoka's motion and Obi-Wan's motion. Just makes it really smooth. Okay, and then the next transition also has a wipe that moves with the motion of characters after Bail Organa leaves to try to rescue some Jedi back to Rex hunting for Ahsoka. And something that's nice about this scene transition is both of the scenes take place in a hallway on a ship. It's just different ships. I thought that was kind of cool. And when it comes to the placement of these Clone Wars Order 66 scenes, there is no more guides for where they canonically take place. So it was simply me guessing on what the timeline was and placing them in a way that I felt had good pacing. So ultimately, almost all of the Clone Wars scenes end before the Mustafar fight scene and the Senate fight scene. Not everyone liked that, but I can explain why. And I guess I might as well get that out of the way here. Okay, so I'm just gonna finish up talking about the timeline here. I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit, but then I'll go back and talk about the individual edits. So Order 66 happens on day 4. It happens rather late on day 4 because it happens at night on Coruscant. So the next day is day 5, which in Star Wars canon is now known as Empire Day, the day that the Empire was created. So on day 5, Obi-Wan and Yoda meet up with Bail Organa. Palpatine creates the Empire, Anakin kills the Separatists. That is after he visits Padme in the early morning. And Obi-Wan and Yoda go to the Jedi Temple to dismantle the signal. So I have placed the remainder of Ahsoka surviving Order 66 and the crash of the Venator ship on that day. Now, realistically, I think that Ahsoka's crash would not have taken place over the course of one day. It was probably only the course of like 1 to 2 hours. So I have stretched that scene out for the purpose of pacing, and I didn't want to stretch it any further because the first scene that we have that is on day 6 is when Obi-Wan visits Padme. And the reason why that is a day after the previous Revenge of the Sith scenes is that in that scene, Padme tells Obi-Wan that Anakin visited her yesterday, meaning that scene has to take place the day after Anakin visited her, which clearly is the same day that Palpatine created the Empire. So in terms of logic reasons, that's why all of those Clone Wars scenes are done by the time that Obi-Wan fights Anakin. Like I said, my goal with this edit was not to create a documentation of exactly when events took place, so I ended up stretching out the events of Ahsoka's crash over the length of a day, because I thought that was relatively believable. I think if it had gone any farther, it wouldn't be believable to the viewer at all when they realize that Padme says yesterday in that scene. It would just feel very strange that that whole thing with Ahsoka was going on for that long, and wouldn't make any sense. It would take you out of the viewing experience if you notice that, so that's that. Also, I simply wanted the last 30 minutes or so of the movie to focus on Anakin versus Obi-Wan and Yoda versus Palpatine. Those lightsaber fight scenes are already intercut and very long scenes on their own, so I didn't want to add more to the climax fight scenes of the movie, which is an issue with The Phantom Menace, where simply too many things are going on during the climax. And I think if you were seeing Ahsoka's crash while you were seeing Obi-Wan fight Anakin and Yoda fight Palpatine, it would just be too much. It would make all those fight scenes take too long and be really exhausting. Plus, I think it's nice if the very end of this movie focuses on Anakin's fate and his children, because after all, he's sort of the center character of the Clone Wars and the prequel trilogy, and he and Obi-Wan were introduced in this movie on Urbana before Ahsoka ever was. So I think it's totally fine if Ahsoka exits the movie 30 minutes before the movie ends, even though she was one of the main characters. The movie simply shifts focus towards the end, towards the events that are most important for the future of the galaxy and the entire Star Wars story. Okay, anyways, back to the cuts that we were talking about here. So we have the scene of Ahsoka finding out about Fives and the inhibitor chips, which she previously didn't know about, and that works as a way to remind the viewer about them and put information about them in these episodes of the Clone Wars, which is something great that Dave Filoni did, not something I did. But in the context of my fan edit movie, it's really nice to get that explanation as to why the clones followed Order 66, which, you know, previously in Revenge of the Sith, you don't get that. So we get the mall hallway massacre scene, and then it cuts to Obi-Wan escaping Utapau and his clones looking for him. Something that I think is really cool with this cut, other than the musical transition, is simply we get the clones voiced by D. Bradley Baker in the Clone Wars talking at the end of one scene, and then at the start of the next one, we get the live action clones. Well, they're not live action, they're animated, but their voice is from Temuera Morrison. Did I say that right? But the guy who plays Jango Fett and the clones in the movies. So it sort of bridges the gap of actors who play the clones and makes them feel more cohesive, I feel. Also, it's a cool cut to see Obi-Wan's clones looking for him while Ahsoka's clones look for her. Okay, so Obi-Wan contacts Bail, then it cuts back to Rex and the clones looking for Ahsoka still, and Ahsoka is able to separate Rex from the other clones so she can take out his chip, yada yada. And I didn't want to break up that sequence at all. I think that scene just needs to breathe and play out on its own. And at the end of that scene, as soon as Rex tells Ahsoka that all of the clones have been ordered to kill all of the Jedi, we get a Part 4 title, which is Victory and Death. So this placement of the part title is because at this point in the movie, both Obi-Wan and Yoda have gotten out of Order 66, they have survived, and Ahsoka hasn't finished surviving it really, but she has saved Rex, so that's a part of surviving it for her, is getting someone who can help her out and saving her friend. So I think that works as, you know, Part 3 Shattered being over, and then Part 4 Victory and Death. Victory is obviously Palpatine's victory, and the death is obviously, you know, the death of the clones, and the death of the Republic, the death of democracy. I don't know which character I was doing. Like, I was kind of doing Obi-Wan, but kind of doing Palpatine at the same time. And sort of the death of Anakin as well, although not literally. But, you know, you could figuratively say Anakin dies and becomes Darth Vader. So that's how that part title applies not only to the Clone Wars, but also to Revenge of the Sith. Okay, so we are now on Day 5, which is known as Empire Day. We transition from Rex and Ahsoka over to Anakin visiting Padme. And I think it's a nice transition to have Rex talk about the clones being ordered to hunt down the Jedi Knights, and then in the next scene showing Anakin, who's sort of the main guy leading the clones in hunting down the Jedi Knights. Also in A New Hope, there's Obi-Wan's line saying that Darth Vader hunted down the Jedi Knights, so, you know, there's that connection. Not within this movie, but it's sort of cool. Okay, so that I could smoothly transition to the next Clone Wars scene, I added in some of the Clone Wars soundtrack, which is like the sort of funeral chorus that we also hear later in Revenge of the Sith. I added it into the end of the scene with Padme, and that gives us a smoother transition back to Ahsoka. Okay, so Maul destroys the hyperdrive of the Venator, and then we switch to Obi-Wan meeting up with Bail and Yoda. This is actually a very quick scene. We go back to the Clone Wars shortly after, but nevertheless, I like seeing what's happening during the Clone Wars scenes, and I think it's cool to finally have this fast cutting back and forth. You know, it's like the movie has built up to this. Alright, so they decide to go back to the temple on Coruscant, and then we get Ahsoka's ship exiting hyperspace, which is once again another quick scene. We have some very quick cutting back and forth here. Ahsoka tells the droid Gigi to find out what happened to the ship, and then we get a transition to seeing Mustafar for the first time. We see the Separatists there. Palpatine tells them Vader will take care of them. Then we cut back to Ahsoka once again very quickly as she and Rex open the hangar doors to realize they're going to crash into a moon, and then we cut to Obi-Wan and Yoda and Bail coming to Coruscant, Everything's moving very quickly here. I don't have that much to say about a lot of these quick edits. It's just for pacing and trying to keep it going fast because this part of the movie is meant to be exciting. It's what things have like built up towards. All right, we have Anakin arriving on Mustafar to kill the Separatists, and something that I thought was pretty cool here is I tried to blend the last note of Darth Vader's theme with the Clone Wars music that plays in that scene. Hopefully that works. The music isn't quite in the same key, so it doesn't work perfectly, but I thought it was good enough. Okay, so now we have the scene of Ahsoka and Rex talking about whether or not they should kill the clones, and Ahsoka says she's not going to kill any of them. Rex cries. It's all very sad. And I put this scene here on purpose to show that Ahsoka is not going to kill her clones, right before the scene where Obi-Wan and Yoda kill clones at the Jedi Temple. And the reason for that is I want to show that Ahsoka, even though she is no longer a Jedi, she's more like what the Jedi should be than even the real Jedi are. Sure, Obi-Wan and Yoda don't really have another way than to kill the clones in that situation, but it shows that Ahsoka is willing to try to figure out how to not kill the clones when Obi-Wan and Yoda don't put in that effort. And I think it's fully intentional by Dave Filoni that Ahsoka is meant to be like a morally perfect Jedi at this point. She's what the Jedi should be, even though the Jedi are no longer what they should be. Which is something I'm really glad the Clone Wars added to the prequel era, because I didn't feel that too much in the prequel movies. Okay, so now we get a sequence in Revenge of the Sith where I actually really love the editing of it already. There's a really great soundtrack piece playing while there is intercutting between Anakin killing the Separatists, Obi-Wan and Yoda investigating the temple, and Palpatine creating the Empire. It all works really well with the music, and I love when Obi-Wan asks who could have done this, and then it cuts to Anakin showing that, yeah, that's who did this. Beautiful editing. I didn't want to get in the way of that, so I don't cut back to the Clone Wars until after this scene. So Anakin kills Newt Gunray, and now we see Ahsoka and Rex executing their own plan to try to save the clones and survive themselves. This scene goes on longer than scenes have been going on lately, and the reason for that is this is some really great action, and I didn't want to cut up the scene with other scenes in the middle of it because the action flows really well in these scenes, and I wanted to let it breathe. But there is one scene that I put in the middle of it, which is Obi-Wan talking to Yoda and finding out that Anakin has in fact turned to the dark side and killed a bunch of Jedi. And there's a transition that I think is a little bit weird here with the audio. The clones kill these droids, and then it transitions to Obi-Wan. It's almost a little bit comedic with the droid scream sort of echoing during the transition. For some reason, the sound didn't quite blend as well as I wanted it to, and this transition is honestly one of the ones I don't like as much as the other ones, but oh well, I tried to edit it as best as I could. Alright, then we go back to Ahsoka's crash, and we finish that crash scene to let it fully breathe, and that way all of Ahsoka's crash takes place on the day after Order 66 instead of making it take place over a longer period of time, which would be ridiculous and not make any sense. Okay, so Obi-Wan visits Padme. She says Anakin was here yesterday. Then we get a scene of Anakin brooding on Mustafar with some really great music, and that music leads us into our second to last Clone Wars scene, which is Ahsoka and Rex after they have buried the clones. I think it makes sense that this scene could take place a day after the crash. Ahsoka and Rex were probably pretty tired out from all of that. I would like to think they probably set up a nice little campfire for the night, and then the next morning they probably buried the clones and left. Which makes sense to me that they would want one day of rest, but not any more than that, because they need to get out of there since, after all, they're going to be hunted. So that's why that made sense logically for the scene placement. A lot of people thought this scene should take place after the Mustafar duel. I personally disagree. Like I said, I think it's fine if Ahsoka exits the story before it's over, because at this point her role in the story is over. And ultimately, this scene is showing the end of the Clone Wars. It's the grave of the clones, and it's really sad. And something that I think works really nicely is that in the next scene, Padme says that the fighting is over, which works really well with this scene that marks the end of the Clone War being right before that scene. And like I said, I wanted to focus on Anakin and his children still for the ending. So Ahsoka being cut into the middle of that would feel kind of weird. Also, if the scene was placed there, it would have been a really long time since the last time we saw Ahsoka. So it would be almost like you forgot that she was in the movie because of, you know, the intense Mustafar duel and all that. Either that, or you would be confused as to why she hasn't had any scenes in a long time. So to me, as weird as it may seem, I thought the last Ahsoka scene fits best before the last 30 minutes of the movie. So we transition out of the scene with a slow fade as the music plays out. The reason for doing a fade was because I simply didn't have enough footage to let that music play out and still show something on the screen, but I think a fade also works really well to sort of show the passage of time and the end of an era, and also like the end of Ahsoka's place in this story. And I think if I had transitioned out of that music quicker, it would not have been good. It would have ruined the effect of that music because it's meant to be slow and sad. So I really like how that music bleeds into the next scene with Padme. So all of the scenes from here on out pretty much focus on Obi-Wan versus Anakin. The scene of Padme leaving Coruscant is going to lead into that. So to me, it's all a part of the fight, even though it's not literally part of them fighting. And then obviously Yoda fights Palpatine during it. Okay, so after Anakin loses the fight, and right before the twins are born, I have added a Part 5 title. Part 5 is of course not as long as the other parts, which were each about an hour long. Part 5 is more like an epilogue chapter, and I titled Part 5 A New Hope, which just makes sense to me because, you know, obviously the movie A New Hope. The end of this movie sets up the movie A New Hope, and Luke and Leia are quite literally a new hope for the galaxy, and Obi-Wan and Yoda and all these characters. Also, it's nice to end such a tragic, sad movie on a hopeful note, which is, of course, credit to George Lucas in this case, not to me. Also, that Part 5 title is over the Force theme, which fits with A New Hope, I think. Okay, and then there's pretty much only one more edit, which is after the twins end up on the planets that they are going to be raised on, and Owen and Beru look at the binary sunset. We get a slow fade out and then fade up to the Darth Vader scene at the end of the Clone Wars. Now, a ton of people in my comments thought that this should be a post-credit scene or a mid-credit scene, and it definitely could have worked well as one. I think it's just my personal preference is that all of the scenes in a movie are done when the end credits roll. That's my personal preference. I think having mid-credit scenes also feels very Marvel-like, and don't get me wrong, Marvel isn't the only movie studio to put post-credit scenes in their movies. They've been in movies a lot longer than that. But it would just feel very Marvel-ish to me, and not that Marvel movies are bad, but there's something different than Star Wars, and Star Wars has never had post-credit scenes. And yes, I did break the main saga format in other ways, but I didn't feel like breaking it in this way. Basically, in Marvel movies, when they have a post-credit scene, it's to set up another movie. And you could say, okay, so this post-credit scene could set up Rebels, right? But I just don't think it's necessary to be in the movie during the credits. And I also really like the slow fade out from the binary sunset to Vader's shuttle landing. It's like, yes, there is hope at the end of the movie, but that hope is overshadowed by the fact that there is Vader, who is still a big threat, and going forward is going to be one of the most important characters in Star Wars. I mean, he already has been, but that was as Anakin Skywalker. Now it's going to be as Darth Vader. Anyways, at the end of the day, it is personal preference not making that an after credit scene. It could have worked fine as one. That's just not what I like. I guess the best way to explain it would be that putting scenes after the credits, for me, they break immersion because you are focused on the movie, you're focused on this world, and then the credits pop up, showing you the names of real people and stuff that is not like in universe for the movie, right? So that sort of takes you out of it. So I think once you're out of it, you should just be out of it and done with the movie. You shouldn't have to go back into it with your mindset. That's how I see it. Like I said, personal preference. And then also from a logical standpoint, this Vader scene takes place after all of the scenes in Revenge of the Sith. We don't know exactly when it takes place. I'm guessing it's a few months or a few years after the end of the movie. Although technically it could take place anytime before The Empire Strikes Back, because Vader is in his A New Hope suit with like the red see-through lenses and all that. But certainly time has passed since the end of the Clone War and the end of Revenge of the Sith and all that. Because, you know, we see that everything is frozen over, and the Empire now has new uniforms for the stormtroopers. They now have a new looking type of shuttle, so to me, it doesn't make sense putting this scene earlier either, for those reasons. Okay, and then the last edit, not counting things in the credits, is from the clone helmet. We do an iris swipe to the credits, just like classic Star Wars credits always are. Some people said that they don't like the upbeat music at the very end, but I think it works just to close out this movie because, you know, the dun 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 dun, that's at the end of every Star Wars movie, so it fits to me. If you don't like it, that's fine. And yeah, I mixed together the credits for the Clone Wars and Revenge of the Sith. I made sure to give credit to everyone, and I added a credit for myself. I added the song Burying the Dead to the credits from the Clone Wars, since the credits were now longer. And then at the very end of the credits, they didn't align perfectly like they used to. So with the final musical cue, I added hashtag Clone Wars saved. Because after all, the Clone Wars was brought back because the fans really wanted it and made their voice known. And thankfully, Lucasfilm listened to the fans on that. I think in general, it's not good to listen to the fans. And I think Lucasfilm has made a lot of mistakes because they've listened so much to the fans. But in terms of bringing back the show to give it the proper ending, they absolutely made the right choice. So yeah, I thought that was a nice little note to put at the very end of the movie. Okay, I'm sure this video was really long, so if you have watched until the end, thank you very much. Thank you for taking interest in my fan edit, and I would like to mention that I do not usually make fan edits or Star Wars videos. On this channel, I make reviews of movies, video games, TV shows, music, and in the future, like probably books once in a while. Anyways, I really like to talk about all sorts of media. Sometimes I build Legos in my videos, or sometimes I find a skeleton in my basement. My videos are weird and hopefully both thoughtful and funny. That's my goal with them. And hopefully some of you Star Wars fans will stick around and watch my regular content. That would be very nice of you. If you did do that. It's not very often that one of my videos ends up blowing up and getting as many views as that last one did. So it's a big opportunity for growing my channel. And I do plan on making some Star Wars videos in the future. I will probably review all of the movies and then review like new Star Wars content as it comes out or something. But this channel will never turn into a channel that only has Star Wars on it or only has Infamous on it. If you don't know what Infamous is, it's a video game series that I used to make a lot of videos about, but I stopped. Anyways, please give my channel a chance and the videos that I make on it. A lot of people said that making this fan edit must have taken a lot of time. And trust me, it did take a reasonable amount of time, but overall it wasn't that hard to edit because I'm mostly just editing scene transitions, whereas in my normal videos I have to edit the whole thing, which takes a lot longer than making this fan edit did. Alright, I'm tired of talking, my mouth is dry, and I'm also sort of tired of the subject of this fan edit now. Not that I didn't like it, but I've talked through everything I have to say about it now, so thank you guys for this brief weird chapter in my videos, and it's time to move on to new things. So thank you, and may the Force be with you always.